Greetings, fellow Whovians, and welcome back to Unrepentant Geeking, the show where a geek can be a geek. As always, I am your host, Shaun, and this is a momentous episode of Unrepentant Geeking for me. It's the last one I'm ever going to record and produce on my old computer. Yes, this fine old machine, she has served me well, these last 6 years, but all things must come to an end. And her service is basically will be done. So, it's a Friday night as I'm recording this, and basically tomorrow I'm finally going to be able to. My new monitor is due to come in the afternoon, so I already got my computer earlier in the week. Once it arrives, I'll be unplugging this machine and setting up my new one. If people are interested, I guess I can go into details. It's nothing later, another episode. It's nothing fancy. I bought a decently powerful one, but one that's on a budget. It's, I got what I got thanks in part to Black Friday sales for under $900, but I think it's going to serve me well for at least a good few 3 or 4 years. I'm not somebody who's overly concerned about cutting-edge gaming on PC. I've got plenty of other options, more than I can ever hope to do between the Switch and the PS4 right now as it is. Regardless, I am hoping the new machine will open some avenues, allow me to stream, as I've mentioned before, do some other things. But that is the future. Right now, we're living in the present, and in the present, it's time to take a look at the past of Doctor Who in the latest episode, The Witchfinders. So it's kind of weird to think that we are almost already done with the newest season of Doctor Who. 2 episodes left, 3 if you count the New Year's special. As always with this show, it seems to come and go so quickly, but especially this year since we're getting a slightly shorter episode count, even though the longer episodes do kind of help make up for it a little, I guess. I guess it's not the worst thing in the world if my biggest complaint so far about a season of a TV series is I want more. I'm disappointed I'm not getting more. So, yeah, I mean, clearly I'm enjoying it, but yeah. I want more, especially after an episode as enjoyable as The Witchfinders, which is indeed, no pun intended, anytime I'm saying witch in this review, I am not making a pun, unless I am, but trust me, when I make a pun, you'll know it. I am many things. Subtle is rarely one of them. Anyways, The Witchfinders was finally an episode that I think a lot of people have been waiting for, a relatively lighter historical. Relatively, because we still get very dark in this episode at times, and we're still dealing with relatively theoretically heavy material, but the fact that this is, we are going back to the 17th century, the distance allows them to be a little lighter, despite the at times theoretically grim material. Overall, this is definitely a lot lighter than Rosa and especially Demons of the Punjab, both of which I will remind you were episodes I absolutely adored. I think stand remarkably high in the overall rating already of the entire history of Who. Witchfinders is not nearly as high, but that's okay. It knows exactly what it's trying to be, which is a overall fun romp in classic Who fashion. And yeah, I've been saying that a lot. Look, there's something to be said that maybe the show has been bending over a little too backwards this season to try and reassure people that, no, it's still the Doctor Who you know. It's still the Doctor Who you know, even though it's different. Different but the same. Same but different. I'm not overly bothered by it when the results are as entertaining as this, but yeah, fine. Look, overall, this has been an interesting season, and I really do admire, producer Chris Chibnall's dedication to not bringing back any familiar faces that we haven't had basically outside of the Doctor herself, and outside of a couple references here or there. There's been nothing of previous Who that's actually shown up on screen. Especially no Cybermen, no Daleks, no none of that. And honestly, as much as I love the classic Who monsters, and I absolutely do, there's also something for giving them a rest, letting them take a break, dialing back on them. I honestly think it's only good if we can get a season, or maybe even 2, maybe even 3, though that's probably too much to ever dream, without the Daleks. And again, I love the Daleks. The Daleks are some of the great villains in all of science fiction. But the thing is, when you overuse a great villain, you tend to get diminishing returns. There's only so many times the implacable, unstoppable, monstrous nightmare enemy that none can defeat can get defeated before it starts to lose a bit of that, That's part of what made the Daleks' grand return in the titular episode Dalek back in the first season of New Who so effective. You just had a single one of these guys, and it had been years since anybody had seen them. And it was just so effective by dialing back and showing just how dangerous even one was. And it added so much stakes to the finale. So anyways, I'm getting a bit off topic. Let's get back to the episode at hand. Point is, episodes like this are a good example of why it's also alright for Who to take a break. Which is not to say that the Moraks, our villains of this episode, are any great addition to the Who canon. In and of themselves, they're perfectly fine, if unmemorable villains. I suspect we will never see them again. If we ever do, it'll be in some sort of ancillary material tie-in, like a comic story or something like that. I'd be shocked if the Moraks ever return, unless, some people think we're going to get some sort of grand recapitulation of the entire season. And early on in this season, that seemed like we might be heading in that direction. It seems less so by now at this point. We'll see. Who knows? We do still have 2 episodes left. Regardless, I don't expect the Moraks, at the very least, to become a regular, reoccurring nemesis of the Doctor, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with introducing a one-off villain. They serve their purpose well in this episode, as written by Joy Wilkinson and directed by Sally Abrahamine, I think. I hope I said that right. I was trying to pronounce it correctly. Regardless, this is a rarity, sadly. All too much of a rarity among Doctor Who. An episode written and directed by women, and that's important, especially with this episode, which this is the first episode to really tackle head-on the fact that, well, the Doctor is now a woman. And I think it does it just right. It makes it a plot point, but it doesn't overly belabor it. It uses it well, and it deploys it in the way it should be, which is basically just one more obstacle for the Doctor to overcome, which has always been part of the point of the show. The Doctor Who has always stacked the deck against the Doctor in various ways, because it wouldn't be any fun otherwise. What makes the Doctor such a great character is watching them overcome, high and seemingly impossible odds. So, yeah, overall, I thought that worked. I thought that they did it, clearly this is not an episode as concerned about addressing, oh my god, these people really stand out. And, yeah, and that's fine. Look, Rosa tackled that head on, and it needed to do that, and it was right to do it, and it did it so effectively. But it's also okay to sometimes just kind of hand-wave that away and get on with things. We don't have to belabor that point every single time. And it works very well. This continued to be a great episode for the companions, including especially Yaz, who, she's definitely not the centerpiece of this episode. This is, if anything, very much a Doctor episode of Doctor Who, which might sound weird, but, sometimes the Doctor is there as much for plot mechanics and to be the dramatic savior and to be the hero, not so much the focus of an episode. But this is definitely a more Doctor-focused episode. But what we get from Yaz is well done, and I do feel like we are starting to see, we're continuing to see consequences from previous episodes in subtle, well-done ways, and her characters coming more and more into focus. And more, like Graham and Ryan have been for some time, someone who I feel more like is a complete character in her own right. And of course, Graham and Ryan continue to be fun. Ryan dealing with the advances of King James, we'll get back to him in a second, was a lot of fun. They played that just right. And come on, Bradley Walsh wearing that hat. And he wore it almost the whole damn episode. I mean, that would have been worth the episode just for that alone. If that was the only good thing about the episode, I might have been okay. Fortunately, it wasn't. So, let's get back, as I said, to King James, played by the ever-amazing, always wonderful, national world treasure, whatever you want to call him, Alan Cumming. I love Alan Cumming. I love him so much. Anytime this man shows up in something, it's always good. It's always a benefit to whatever he's in. Even if what he's in is crap, he classes it up a bit more. And he has so much fun in this episode. He is just chewing the scenery left and right. And yet, when the episode needs it, when they need to dial back on the theatrics, when we need to narrow in and get a more dramatic, more heartfelt, more serious moment, without any surprise whatsoever, Alan Cumming absolutely steps up and just I am of course talking about the scene, that sequence between him and Jodie Whittaker's 13th Doctor, where they basically just where she basically just lays him bare and just reveals underneath all the pomp and all the extravagant, exaggerated behavior, the dark, tragic beating heart of this character. And it's so effective. They have such great chemistry, not in a romantic way, just in the terms of two actors and two characters having this moment. And it's just such a well done scene. I rewatched that scene a couple times, just out of sheer pleasure. It was a really effective scene in and of itself. It fit perfectly into the episode, but after I'd watched the episode, there's something to be said to go back and watch two master actors ply their craft and play off each other so expertly, so well done. Yeah, I just, what a good, meaty scene. That was the equivalent of a really delicious, I don't know, steak or something you can really just sink your teeth in and chew and find all sorts of flavors, and this is quickly getting out of control in terms of metaphors, so let's just move on. Overall, this was great. This was a very strong episode. A definite, I'd say, B+. B+. Let's say B+. Letters, numbers, they're all kind of arbitrary anyways. This was well done. And again, this shows that while things have changed, and we are definitely in a different era, a smarter era, I think, a more aware era, a more, I'll say it, progressive era, we can still engage in some old-fashioned, classic Who shenanigans. I mean, the Moraks were such just straight, I've overused the word already, but I don't know what better way to put it, classic Who kind of alien. I mean, yes, they were a little silly in the end, but they were creepy when they needed to be. And overall, I do want to say that, I think Siobhan Finneran as both the Moraks Queen and as the detestable Becca Savage did exactly what was needed of her and more. I mean, I more like she did it. She did a perfectly serviceable, fine job as the Moraks Queen. I maybe the episode lost a little power as we played up the camp at that point, but on the other hand, like I said, there is something comforting about getting just to see a nice, old-fashioned Who evil alien who's evil for the sake of largely being evil. It's kind of nice to revisit that, but I thought, definitely she was stronger as Becca Savage, somebody who was clearly detestable, a hypocrite of the highest order, especially as we learn more and more about her, and just so easy to hate, and yet, while definitely one of the villains, while definitely, a monstrous figure, someone who also was still human, and if not relatable, understandable. And that's good. That's good. It gave the episode extra kick. It gave the episode extra, power. I thought Tilly Steele as Willa Twiston, as the younger woman, also did a good job. The first half of the episode is basically almost a British version of The Crucible, with the whole witchcraft angle and the accusations flying left and right, and it was really effective watching Willa kind of cave, as it were, to the peer pressure of the scenario, feeling the weight of it and the risk to her own life, and it was, it was well handled because it was very believable, it was very understandable, it was exactly the kind of behavior where it's like, who could say we wouldn't react the same way in the situation? You never really know. And yet at the same time, she manages to overcome it. Like I said, there was a little bit of creakiness to the alien menace once we revealed what they were. But the big reveal happened late enough in the episode that was okay. Like, if we'd gotten what exactly the Moraks were, and especially if we'd gotten the Moraks Queen, I think, earlier, especially significantly earlier, I think it would have definitely undermined the episode. It would have drained a lot of the tension and the power, and it would have definitely undercut what was going on. Instead, I think they deploy them just at the right moment. The reveal happens in the way it needed to happen, when it needed to happen, to allow the episode to build to its finale. And if the finale was a little goofy, I'm not opposed to goofiness in my Doctor Who. I quite welcome it when appropriate, and this episode, it was very appropriate. So that does it for this episode. And then, like I said, we've only got 2 left. And indeed, our next episode is It Takes You Away, with a description of basically the Doctor and companions ending up in present-day Norway, where they find a young girl has boarded herself up in a small cottage, terrified of a monster that apparently lurks in the woods. So it's going to be interesting to see how exactly that plays out. It looks like we could be getting back to some more horror. Maybe, we've definitely gotten... There was definitely an element of horror in this episode. Definitely. A bit of a almost Japanese Ring style stuff going on with our zombie women. There was definitely some classic horror there. But it wasn't overly played. Like, I wouldn't say Witchfinders was ever actually scary. This season, we've really only gotten 1 episode that was arguably actual horror, and that was Arachnids in the UK. And that was as much just because spiders are demons! Sorry. No, it looks like we may be going back into more direct, explicit horror, at least as much as Doctor Who will ever get. I'm curious to see. And then our last episode of the season is interestingly titled The Battle of, oh Lord, Ranskur of Kolos. Nope, I don't think I even got close. Regardless, that episode seems to be about a planet where there's been a battle, and there's a mysterious commander with no memory, and the last line of the description of the episode is, answers will lead Doctor and her friends towards a deadly reckoning. So maybe this is the episode where things are going to all come together. I don't know. Look, we got double mention of that alien, the alien menace from the first episode, whose name, what was their name? I mean, Tim Jab was our, Zim Shah was the bad guy, but his race was called, the Stenza. So maybe this is where the Stenza return, and we get, something that brings the whole season together. I mean, it seems unlikely at some point down the line if Chibnall's run, the Stenza are going to return at some point. Like I said, we got mention of them twice in a row in the first 2 episodes of the season. But you know what? If they hold that off until next season, I'd be okay with that. I'd be more than okay with that. Again, I'm quite willing at this point to go wherever they're leading. Regardless, The Witchfinders was a really fun episode, thanks in no small part to a very memorable performance by, wow, I'm not doing well all of a sudden, people. I'm falling apart right at the last minute. Alan Cumming as King James. It seems unlikely we're going to get him back, but anytime they want to bring him back on, whether it's to play James again or any character, I'd be more than happy. Regardless, great episode. Definitely check it out. That's going to do it for this episode of Unrepentant Geeking. As I have said ad nauseum at this point, I have a new computer, and it's going to be interesting to see what changes come, because there are changes coming to the show. Nothing super dramatic. I will say, once this season of Doctor Who is over, I think I'm probably going to cut back on weekly reviews. I will see. I'll play it by ear. If there's something I want to talk about, fine. You'll get at least 2 episodes a month from me. I can say that much. You'll definitely still get regular content from me, and I've got a bunch of ideas for what's going to fill the void once Who is done. But anyways, that is for another day. For now, thank you as always for watching and helping support the show, keeping the lights on around here. Until next time, for Unrepentant Geeking, I'm Shaun Cronenfeld, wishing you all long days and pleasant nights.